I was going to make the same point about the fifth Consumer Protection CPSC commissioner. Well made, much better than I could. Let me ask our other witness, Ms. Lawrence, on behalf of the Toy Industry Association, assuming that you support toy safety, isn't it important that we have a fifth commissioner confirmed?
Absolutely. The CPSC is a small agency with a big mission, and we would support all resources to help them see through that mission for all consumer products, including the addition of the commissioner.
I really welcome and appreciate your support for additional resources. I assume, Ms. Rhodes, you agree that additional resources are important for the CPSC?
Yes, they're needed for the CPSC to do their job and protect consumers.
And Dr. Hoffman, would you agree?
I absolutely agree.
You know, for this agency to be more than, as I mentioned earlier, a paper tiger, it has to have resources to investigate, to take evidence, to build the case, and in addition to eliminating Section 6B and the impediments it poses to effective education and disclosure, the resources are necessary to uncover the hazards in the first place. Would you agree, Ms. Rhodes?
Yes, they are needed.
You know, Ms. Hamsmith, I think, mentioned in her written testimony that Australia is one nation that has implemented a mandatory product standard to require warning labels and child-resistant closures on battery-operated devices, including toys. These requirements are set to go into effect, I believe, in 2022. What do you believe, Ms. Rhodes, that kind of requirement would have on toy safety in this country? In effect, it's Reese's Law.
Yeah, I believe it's critical that Reese's Law is passed. When speaking to a pediatrician from University Hospital, Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital, we learned that button battery ingestions can start to burn holes within the first 30 minutes. It's critical that we have these safeguards to protect children's health.
Dr. Hoffman, you've mentioned that you support Reese's Law. Ms. Lawrence, would you agree that we should approve Reese's Law?
Yes, in fact, the Toy Association applauds the work you are doing to help keep children, pardon me, to help keep children safe from battery ingestion. And we recommend that you use the example that has been set in our US toy safety standard as a model for what you are seeking to do for other product categories.
And as you mentioned in your testimony, Ms. Lawrence, toys or objects with a play value are required to adhere to ASTM F963, which has a set of toy safety standards. Would you comment on what effect those standards have had on the toy industry?
Are you asking regarding batteries or in general?
Both, in general and specifically with respect to toy batteries.
Okay. Well, those standards are required by law, and companies must demonstrate compliance with third-party independent testing by an accredited laboratory and be certified that they comply with the standards. We have noticed since this has been made mandatory in the CPSIA Act of 2008, that we have seen a decrease in the number of recalls. We've also seen a significant decrease in the number of incidents related to toys. So we do see that making these requirements mandatory for all products sold in the US has had an impact. Regarding batteries, that standard was implemented as part of the toy standard in the 1990s. And when battery ingestion data came out about 10 years ago, we started to go through that data and look at what are the scenarios and examples where toys were involved somehow. And we found it was from situations where batteries were left within a child's reach, whether it was a spent battery or a new battery intended to go in a toy. That's how children were getting the batteries. But the locking mechanism that we have required in our toy standard was upheld because we found that it was working. Children were not, that locking mechanism was not failing and allowing children to get the batteries that way. But what it did tell us was that we needed to put labeling on toys so that consumers really understood how serious a hazard this is for children to access batteries from any source. And so in 2016, we implemented that addition to the toy standard. And we have found that this has made an impact. In general, most of the incidents are not related to toys. And when they are, it is because the batteries have been left within a child's reach or a child found them in the garbage can.
So I really hope that the Toy Association will back Reese's law, and that when you get back to us with that position, that it will be to support Reese's law, because it would, in effect, extend or incorporate warnings and the compartments or securing, locking, whatever you call it, of the batteries within a device so that they would not pop out or be easily accessible to children. Dr. Hoffman, let me go back to something that is sort of a pet peeve of mine. I highlight it every year, balloons. I'm holding up a couple of examples. If we were not in the United States Senate, I would do what I normally do in the press conferences we have with Conperg in Connecticut, which is to blow up one of these balloons and then pop it and show how the remnants of that deflated balloon are so easily swallowed. Can you comment on how important a choking hazard balloons can be if they're not properly supervised?
Absolutely, Senator. I remember very vividly when I was in training in residency, caring for an 18-month-old child who at a birthday party had been holding a balloon, and an adult came up behind the child and tickled them to startle them, which caused the balloon to pop. The child inhaled and the balloon lodged itself in the child's airway. And he sadly died as a result of that. And that has forever impacted me. The issue of rubber and latex balloons, especially, it has been estimated that it's around 15 children a year die as a result of aspiration or ingestion of either balloons or parts of balloons. This is another thing that's completely preventable, and I appreciate that people like balloons. They're fun, but they're also they need to be considered a hazard. We don't see the same risk associated with the Mylar balloons, which I think are a reasonable alternative for somebody who absolutely positively had to have a balloon. But I think in 2021, it's hard to come up with an argument why we still need latex or rubber balloons, especially around kids. I think one of the things that needs to be highlighted, we spent a lot of time talking about toys. Kids don't care whether something is labeled a toy or not labeled a toy. If you give a child your car keys and that fob has button batteries in it, that child is going to explore it and play with it in a way they would play with anything else, including, especially for younger kids, putting it in their mouth. And so I think we need to be looking at this from the perspective of kids, recognizing that everything is a toy, and developmentally they're built to explore. And a lot of that exploration involves putting things in their mouth, especially for younger kids. And the safest thing we can possibly do is ensure that kids don't have access to those products.
I think that is a really excellent explanation. Not only do kids not know whether something is a toy or not, they don't really care or know whether a balloon is made of one substance or another, Mylar versus any other substance. And so Mylar balloons are a pretty good choice. Would you agree?
I think they're a much safer choice. They're not without hazard, but they're a much safer choice.
But parental supervision is important because asphyxiation can be caused in a matter of minutes, correct?
Yes, and I think parental supervision, I mentioned earlier this idea about layers of protection. Parental supervision is an absolutely essential layer, but it is completely insufficient because nobody's supervision can be perfect. And yeah, I mentioned earlier, I've had the privilege of working with a number of families who've lost children to unintentional injury and helping elevate their stories and bring their voices to the advocacy work. And one parent, I don't know if Senator Blackburn is still there, but a parent who's become a very close friend from Tennessee, always talks about, everybody expects they're going to find the loophole, that it's never going to happen to them. But the fact of the matter is, it does happen to people. It happens to real people who love their kids, who care, who are doing the best they possibly can, and all it takes is a second of distraction. And nobody can provide the perfect level of supervision. So we need those multiple layers, and that includes, things like closures on battery, closures to ensure that batteries can't be released, and removing potential hazards from the home, and making sure that things don't get to market that are fundamentally dangerous. I think that the magnets that you mentioned earlier are a really good example of something that, to a child, doesn't matter whether it's called a toy or marketed as a toy. To a child, rare earth magnets are a toy, and they end up in the mouth, and then they end up in the gut, and then that ends badly.
And I'm holding up some examples of those magnets, Dr. Hoffman. Rare earth magnets, they're very, very powerful. They're used on people's desks. They're kind of playthings for adults while they're on the phone. They can fiddle with them. But as you say, a child who walks into a parent's home office doesn't know that they're for the parent to fiddle with or play with, not for the child. And they are really difficult to separate, but they are composed of a lot of these tiny beads. Could you tell us, I tried a little bit earlier, what happens exactly to, or can happen to a child's digestive system if they swallow some of these magnets?
So thank you, Senator. If the child ingesting one would not be a problem. Ingesting more than one, those magnets are so strong that they're going to find each other across the bowel. And if they are inches apart, they will be drawn to each other. And what happens is they squeeze the bowel tissue, the gastrointestinal tissue between them, and that causes a loss of blood supply, and the bowel dies. And so injury there can happen also, within a matter of a very short period of time, and as short a time as an hour. It can lead to perforation of the intestines, which is a very serious, life-threatening condition. And as happens with button and coin cell ingestions, they can be hard to detect, and they can often go undetected until they've caused serious injury.
Thank you. A number of pieces of legislation have been mentioned. The Sturdy Act, which is led by Senator Casey, that requires the CPSC to revise safety standards for freestanding clothing storage units, such as dressers, bureaus, or chests of drawers. And a second version of the Sturdy Act was just reintroduced with consensus agreement among a number of the manufacturers. There are other pieces of legislation that have been introduced, and hope that we can move them forward. Ms. Rhodes, do you support this legislation?
The Sturdy Act? U.S. Park does not have a position on the Sturdy Act.
And Ms. Lawrence, I think you mentioned that you do. I don't know whether, Dr. Hoffman, you are familiar with the Sturdy Act.
Absolutely, and the American Academy of Pediatrics supports it very strongly.
I want to just close by, again, thanking all of our panelists, our witnesses this morning. You have provided a really powerful record for passing Reese's Law. I know that Ms. Lawrence will be providing us her position on behalf of the Toy Industry Association, but again, to Trista Hamsmith, You have really made this cause a national issue, and I'm very proud to be introducing Reese's Law today with Senator Blackburn. We hope it will be approved promptly. The sooner it's passed, the more children we can protect and the more injuries we can prevent. So I want to thank all of our witnesses and my colleagues. The record will remain open for 2 weeks in case there are any written questions from